My wife was cheating on me and I dared to get a DNA paternity test on all 4 of our children. Before everything turned upside down, life seemed simple, almost routine. My days revolved around work, taking care of my kids, and enjoying those small, meaningful moments that made the chaos feel worthwhile. Sarah and I lived what many would call the suburban dream: 4 kids, a cozy home, and a career that gave us purpose. I thought we had a solid foundation, that all the little compromises we made were worth it for the happiness and stability of our children. But now, looking back, I see that cracks had formed, small ones at first, so easy to dismiss as the inevitable drift that happens over time. Over the years, I noticed Sarah pulling away. At first, I chalked it up to the sheer demands of raising 4 kids, running a household, and managing the pressures of her job. I was exhausted myself, so I didn't overthink it. But there was a lingering sense of unease, a feeling I couldn't shake, like there was an invisible wall growing between us. Sometimes, I felt like an outsider in my own home, as if Sarah was carrying some kind of burden she didn't want to share. I tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing on being a good dad and husband, but the discomfort only deepened with time. One morning, I was in full-on parent mode, rushing to get the kids ready for our trip. "All right, everyone, let's move! Grab your bags and head to the car," I called out. From somewhere inside the house, one of the kids shouted back, "I can't find my sunglasses." Without missing a beat, I replied, "Check on top of your head." A few seconds later, "Found them!" they yelled. The kids started filing out, one by one, dragging their bags and dropping them next to the car. My trusty old Subaru Outback, with its endless mileage but dependable engine, was prepped for the road. I locked the front door, walked over to the driveway, and popped open the back hatch. The kids tossed their bags in, then scrambled to find their seats and buckle up. After I made sure the luggage was organized, I climbed into the driver's seat and ran through my usual pre-trip checklist. "Is everyone here? Mia? Jackson? Sophia? Olivia?" I called out, waiting for the usual chorus of "Here!" from all 4 of them. Then I rattled off the packing list. Bathing suit, sunglasses, hat, flip-flops, running shoes, underwear, t-shirts, shorts, sunscreen, phones, and tablets. "Did we forget anything?" The kids assured me they had it all. "All right, Florida, here we come," I announced. A loud, enthusiastic "Yes!" erupted from the back seat. With that, we hit the road, heading to the airport for our spring break adventure in Florida. The flight was a direct one to Orlando, and by mid-afternoon, I had the rental van keys in hand. My plan was straightforward: we'd check in, get settled, and hit the pool as soon as possible. I had booked 2 adjoining rooms, one for the kids and one for me, to keep things organized. We had 5 action-packed days lined up to explore the major attractions, including a day at SeaWorld. Planning this trip wasn't without its challenges. Sarah didn't agree with the timing and wanted to come along but insisted we postpone it until summer because of her upcoming trip to New York. I argued she didn't absolutely need to go to NYC and should come with us instead. But in the end, I lost that battle. She stuck to her plans, and I stood firm on taking the kids to Florida as scheduled. Disney, as I soon learned, is an unstoppable money-making juggernaut. Disney World is enormous, a sprawling complex with hotels and resorts tailored to meet every need. The kids are having the time of their lives, and my main role is simple: keep track of them and foot the bills, especially for food. They can really eat. I make sure they get at least 1 healthy meal a day, usually dinner, and I'm pretty strict about including some fruit, vegetables, and milk in the mornings. I wouldn't call myself a negligent dad. I don't just let them run wild on junk food. My daily plan is straightforward. We head back to the hotel by 4 p.m. to cool off in the pool, clean up, and get ready for dinner. After dinner, if they're still full of energy, they can swim again, but by 9 p.m., everyone's back in the room. Teeth are brushed, and it's quiet time until they drift off to sleep, usually by 9:30. The mix of fresh air and constant activity does wonders. It's enough to wear them out. Once they're asleep, I finally get some time to myself. I'll crack open a beer, respond to work emails, and make sure the kids call Sarah every day. She knows to be available when they call, no distractions. Of course, I'm fully aware of what she's doing in New York, though she has no idea I know. It's one of those unspoken truths I've decided to keep to myself, for now. The truth is, I know more about Sarah than she realizes. I've known for a while now that she's been involved with other men, and not just recently. This has been going on for most of our marriage. And as painful as it is, I've also come to terms with the fact that I'm not the biological father of our kids. It's a harsh reality, but one I've confirmed. I had DNA tests done. Yes, our children share my blood type, which is how this secret has stayed hidden for so long. It just so happens that the man who is their biological father has a similar blood type to mine. When I first met Sarah, I was absolutely infatuated with her. She was everything I could have dreamed of, tall, blonde, beautiful, and incredibly smart. What wasn't to love? That infatuation grew into a deep love, and soon after, we were married. The kids came quickly, 4 of them, and life became a whirlwind of family obligations. My world revolved around the kids, Sarah, the house, and my job. I barely made time for myself, though I eventually carved out an early morning running routine 3 times a week. Those 5 or 6 miles became my escape, a way to clear my head before diving into the chaos of the day. Being a father is the most important role I have. For little people count on me for nearly everything, and I take that responsibility seriously. Sarah, to her credit, has been an incredible mom. She was a stay-at-home parent for the first few years, and when she went back to work, she juggled it all impressively. But as time went on, her job began to create problems I didn't fully grasp until about 3 years ago. That's when I discovered her infidelity. I didn't go looking for it, it fell into my lap by accident. It started with a routine doctor's visit when I learned my blood type didn't match Jackson's. At first, I thought there must have been a mistake, so I had more tests done. And that's when the truth hit me like a freight train. I was utterly devastated. Let me tell you about Jake, the biological father of my kids. In my eyes, Jake is a total idiot, but Sarah has been infatuated with him for years. He works for his father, Ralph, who built a successful construction company from the ground up. Ralph and his wife enjoy a luxurious lifestyle, and Jake grew up learning one key lesson from his father: money can solve just about any problem. Jake himself is married to Emily. They tied the knot after she got pregnant, and on the surface, their life looks picture perfect. But the reality is, Jake has never been truly happy. While I've always worked hard to provide for my family, discovering the truth about Jake and the kids changed everything for me. It made me realize I needed a backup plan, a safety net, in case Sarah ever decided to leave me for him. Oddly enough, despite her long-running infidelity, Sarah seemed perfectly content with our life together. She never complained about anything, our home, the kids, or her job. She acted like everything was fine. When I first found out I wasn't the biological father of my children, I fell into a deep depression. I spent weeks agonizing over what to do next. At one point, I even consulted a lawyer to explore my options, but every scenario came with serious downsides. If I filed for divorce, Sarah would likely get custody of the kids, and I'd still be on the hook for child support, even though they're not biologically mine. The court doesn't care about what's fair, it cares about what's best for the kids. My lawyer pointed out that abandoning them would only hurt them, and I couldn't bring myself to do that. I love those kids more than anything, and to them, I'm their dad, biological ties or not. So I came up with a plan. In the short term, I decided to keep my discovery to myself and act like everything was normal. I figured it would take me a couple of years, maybe 2 to 4 at most, to put my long-term plan into action. The first step was creating a financial safety net. I started quietly funneling money into a separate account, investing it in blue-chip stocks like Tesla, Amazon, and Apple. Over time, I built up a portfolio that's now worth over $6 million, and it's still growing. Sarah has no idea this account even exists. She has her secrets, and now I have mine. My goal wasn't revenge, it never was. I had to think about my kids. I didn't want them caught in the middle of any chaos. My focus was on creating options for myself, a way to protect my future without disrupting theirs. My plan was nearly complete, with just one more year needed to tie up loose ends. Meanwhile, life carried on as usual. After Sarah and I celebrated our anniversary, I took the kids to the annual RV show. They loved it. They couldn't stop talking about how cool it would be to travel the country in an RV. At first, It just seemed like another fun idea they'd forget about, but their excitement started to rub off on me. When we got home, they dumped out a bag of brochures in the family room and spread them across the floor, comparing layouts and features. Their unanimous favorite? A grand design fifth-wheel trailer with bunk beds and 2 bathrooms. It was spacious, practical, and perfect for our family. Of course, I'd need a truck capable of pulling it, so I started researching. I found a brand new Ford F-250 crew cab that fit the bill perfectly. It was bold, powerful, and came in my favorite color, red. After a quick trip to the bank, I walked out with 2 cashier's checks and sealed the deal. That truck was mine, and it felt like another piece of my plan clicking into place. Sarah wasn't just upset, she was furious. "Ethan, we're supposed to discuss big purchases like this," she said, her voice laced with exasperation. "How much did you spend?" I didn't flinch. "Well, the trailer was about $90,000, and the truck set me back another $65,000. So, roughly $155,000 total. Not bad, right?" Her face went pale as she sank into the nearest chair. On the inside, I have to admit, I was a little amused. "There are still a few things we need to get before we can start traveling," I added casually. "But the kids are beyond excited to hit the road." The truth is, this wasn't just about the kids or the trailer, it was about setting the stage. Sarah had been maintaining her long-term affair with Jake, and I felt like it was finally my turn to start calling the shots. I hadn't acted on my frustrations yet, mainly because I'd only recently uncovered the full extent of their relationship, but I knew I had catching up to do. Funneling money into investments was step 1 of my long-term plan, and it had worked better than I'd hoped. Step 2? Start putting pressure on Sarah. I wanted to make her question whether I knew more than I let on. The whole trailer and truck idea came from the kids' excitement about traveling, but I also used it as a way to test Sarah. Would she go along with it or push back? Buying the trailer and truck without consulting her was deliberate, a subtle dig. Frankly, she deserved it. When I pulled into the driveway with the shiny new truck and trailer, the kids went wild with excitement. They couldn't wait to check out the trailer. We extended the slides, and they eagerly started setting up their bunks. That night, they begged to sleep in the trailer, and I suggested to Sarah that we should join them to test it out. Reluctantly, she agreed. She stayed with me that night, but I could tell her decision wasn't entirely voluntary. The pressure, from the kids and from me, was palpable. The weekend itself was incredible. The trailer and truck worked like a charm, and the kids had the time of their lives. They spent hours riding bikes, hiking, swimming, and running around the park, making new friends everywhere they went. We ended each night around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. They were so happy they didn't want to go home, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. Sarah, however, didn't share their enthusiasm. Even with all the comforts of the luxury trailer, she looked miserable, swatting at bugs and grumbling about the outdoors. It was clear this wasn't her idea of fun. But I know the clock is ticking. I can't ignore Sarah's double life any longer. She needs to make a choice, Jake or me. I've been the one raising these kids, loving them, caring for them, being there through every scraped knee, bedtime story, and hug. I'm their father in every way that matters. There's no room for another man, a biological father, no less, who only drops by for his weekly visit with their mother before heading back to his own family. That's not how this works. The time is coming to have the conversation, to lay everything out, and to resolve this once and for all. Sarah needs to decide where her priorities lie, and I'm ready to move forward, with or without her. A few months later, it was finally time to move forward. I was ready, and the kids were too, though I wasn't sure if Sarah would feel the same. Her life, comfortable and carefully curated, was about to face a reckoning. It started on a Friday night. I came home to find Sarah in the kitchen while the kids were scattered around the house and backyard. For a moment, I stood there, taking in the image of domestic bliss, but my mind quickly shifted to the reality of Sarah and Jake. I knew I couldn't delay the inevitable any longer. "Sarah," I said as I walked into the kitchen, "how about we get a sitter tomorrow night, and go out for dinner? Just us. We need to make some plans, and it'd be good to do it without any interruptions." She turned to me with a small smile. "That sounds great. We've needed some time alone without the kids demanding our attention." I made a reservation at an Italian restaurant for 7 p.m., aiming for a quiet, private table where we could talk without distractions. The sitter arrived promptly at 6:30, and we headed out. Sarah seemed in good spirits, chatting about the kids and her day at work during the drive. At the restaurant, we eased into familiar topics: family, work, plans for the summer. But I knew the moment was coming, and when it did, I didn't sugarcoat it. "Sarah," I said, my tone calm but firm, "there's something I need to discuss. It's been bothering me for a long time, and I know it's something you don't want to talk about." Her face froze, her smile fading. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. "I need to know how much longer you plan to continue your relationship with Jake." Her reaction was immediate and unforgettable. She coughed, choked on her wine, and began denying it with all the conviction she could muster. But I didn't let her off the hook. "How much longer?" I pressed. "Another year? 5 years?" Her face went pale, and she started struggling to breathe. For a moment, I thought she might pass out. I waved over the waiter, calmly explaining that my wife wasn't feeling well, and asked for the check. Sarah was visibly shaken as we left, and by the time we reached the car, she was vomiting into the parking lot. The ride home was silent. Once we got there, she went straight to the bedroom without a word. I reassured the kids that their mom wasn't feeling well and then went to check on her. She was sitting on the bathroom floor, still a mess. I helped her undress and get into the shower, then took her clothes and shoes to the laundry. The shoes were beyond saving. She stayed in the shower for nearly 40 minutes. I knew she wasn't just cleaning up, she was processing everything. Her double life, her relationship with Jake, the lies, and now the reality that it was all coming to light. But I wasn't about to make this my problem anymore. When Sarah finally emerged, she put on her pajamas and retreated to the bedroom without a word. I went to the kitchen, poured myself an IPA, and sat alone, thinking about the mess we were in. My priorities were clear now: the kids came first, me second, and Sarah last. That night, I slept in the spare bedroom. I didn't hear from Sarah until Sunday morning, when I woke up early and brought her a cup of coffee. She looked exhausted, curled up in bed. "Morning," I said gently, setting the coffee on her nightstand. "The kids will be up soon, and we've got things to do." She nodded silently, and I left her to get ready. But when I returned, she was gone. The day went on as usual, shuttling the kids to their activities, but Sarah was unusually quiet, barely speaking to me or the kids. She looked like someone who just received terrible news, and I wondered how she'd handle what was coming next. After the kids went to bed, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. I poured myself another beer and brought Sarah a glass of wine. "So, when are we going to talk?" I asked, handing her the wine. She stared at the glass for a moment before whispering, "I don't know what to say." "Let's start at the beginning," I said, sitting down across from her. "I know you've been involved with Jake for a long time, longer than we've even been married. I feel like an outsider, like you've been lying to me our entire marriage." Tears welled up in her eyes, and her voice trembled. "You're a good man, Ethan. A good husband. A great father." "Yes, I am," I said, taking a sip of my beer. "But I'm not their biological father, am I?" She couldn't meet my gaze. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry I did that to you. Do you love Jake so much that you wanted him to be their father?" I asked. She didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. After a long pause, I asked the question I'd been dreading but needed to ask. "So, what's your plan, Sarah? What do you want to do?" But she had no response. Just silence. "If you don't have a plan, Sarah, then I do," I said firmly. "You might not like it, but the choice is yours. Decide what you want, for yourself and for this family." I paused for a moment to let my words sink in. Then, without waiting for her response, I added, "I've already spoken to the kids. I told them I had a job opportunity elsewhere. They're excited about moving and even thank you for supporting the idea." Her face betrayed a flicker of panic. She knew exactly what I was implying. The idea of losing me, and possibly the kids, was a threat that struck at the foundation of her double life with Jake. "You have a decision to make," I continued, my voice unwavering. "Tell me, and more importantly, tell the kids what you really want. But tonight I think it's best if you sleep in the spare bedroom." I walked out, leaving her to stew in her thoughts. For years, I had been preparing for this moment. Phase 1 had already been in motion, building a financial safety net so robust that I could execute any plan I deemed necessary. I wasn't just looking for an exit strategy. I was ensuring I could protect my relationship with the kids, no matter what Sarah or the courts decided. But the main question still lingered. Would Sarah try to make amends, to prioritize her family and stay? Or would she decide that her future lay with Jake? I wasn't in a rush to get my answer. Let her sweat. Let Jake sweat. In the meantime, I kept my distance. The silent treatment was deliberate, a psychological tactic to make Sarah rethink her actions and consider the potential fallout. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices, to understand that actions have consequences. Most importantly, I was resolute about one thing: I would not lose my children. They were my heart, my purpose. Sarah's betrayal wouldn't change that. No matter how long or expensive the fight, I would ensure they stayed with me. 3 months later, the kids began voicing their interests and goals. Mia wanted to train for a triathlon and asked for a new racing bike. At the bike shop, we found one that was perfect, lightweight, aerodynamic, and fast. The price? $2,000, and with all the gear, it totaled close to $3,000. Mia reminded me a lot of myself. I used to race mountain bikes back when I had the time. Encouraging her dreams felt right. Jackson, meanwhile, wanted to play hockey. His gear would cost about $3,000 this year, not including the specialized sticks he'd need. Sophia was leaning toward soccer, thankfully a less expensive sport, and Olivia expressed interest in music lessons and basketball. As I managed their growing schedules, it became clear I couldn't do it all alone. Sarah would need to step up, and that might just interfere with her time with Jake. Maybe that was the point. 2 months after the kids shared their plans, I sat them down for a serious talk. I explained that their mother needed to make some changes and that we could help guide her toward the right decision. Mia, always the practical one, suggested we encourage Sarah to quit her job. If she's at home more, she'll have more time for us, she reasoned. The others nodded in agreement. I assured them we had enough money to make it work and promised that this shift would benefit the entire family. In my mind, the plan was coming together. Sarah's double life was nearing its expiration date, and the kids were the key to pushing her toward the decision she needed to make. The foundation was set, and Operation Exodus was entering its final phase. "So, Sarah, how are you?" I asked, keeping my tone calm but detached. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then she answered, her voice trembling slightly. I'm fine, Ethan. But where are you? Why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" I glanced at the kids, who were laughing and playing near the grill. The contrast between their carefree joy and Sarah's uneasy tone struck me. "We're in Canada," I said simply. "Algonquin Provincial Park right now. It's beautiful here. The kids are loving it." "Canada?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You just left? Without telling me? You've had months to make a decision, Sarah," I said firmly. "I gave you time. But the kids and we couldn't wait around forever. We needed this trip. A fresh start, some clarity." "You're punishing me," she said, her voice breaking. I sighed, leaning back against the picnic table. "No, Sarah. I'm not punishing you. I'm prioritizing our kids and myself. We've been through enough, don't you think?" There was another long pause. Then, softly, she asked, "Are you coming back?" "That depends," I said honestly. "Are you ready to make a decision? Because I'm not coming back to the same situation we left. The kids deserve better, and so do I." "You left without giving me a chance to talk," she said, her tone shifting from sadness to frustration. "I've been waiting for months, Sarah," I reminded her. "I've been patient. But every day that passed, it felt like you were choosing him over us. So yes, I left, to give us some space, some perspective. Now it's up to you. What do you want, Sarah?" Her breath hitched, and I could tell she was trying to compose herself. "I want my family, Ethan," she said finally. "Do you?" I asked pointedly. "Because wanting your family means making sacrifices. It means letting go of him. It means being honest and present. Can you do that?" She faltered, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know." Then I guess you have more thinking to do, I said, my tone hardening slightly. Take your time, Sarah. The kids and I will be on the road for a while. We're heading to Nova Scotia next. When you're ready to talk, really talk, you know where to find me. Ethan. She started, but I cut her off. I need to go, I said. The kids are waiting for dinner, and we've got a campfire to build. Take care of yourself, Sarah. Without waiting for a reply, I ended the call and handed the phone back to Mia. She looked up at me, curious. Mom sounded upset, she said. She's just thinking about some things, I replied, ruffling her hair. Let's focus on having fun, okay? We've got s'mores to make. Mia smiled and ran off to join her siblings. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone, feeling the weight of the conversation settle over me. I didn't know what Sarah's next move would be, but one thing was certain, the kids and I were moving forward, with or without her. As soon as Sarah's voice echoed through the driveway, the kids froze for a moment, exchanging quick glances. Then, one by one, they jumped up and ran outside. I stayed in my seat, finishing the sandwich I'd made, wondering how this reunion would go. Mom! Mia's voice carried through the open window, followed by the excited chatter of the others. I could hear Sarah's voice trembling as she greeted them, her words a mix of relief and emotion. After a few minutes I stood, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and stepped outside. Sarah was kneeling on the driveway, her arms wrapped around all four kids. Her eyes were red and puffy, but when she looked up at me, there was something else there, anger, desperation, maybe even guilt. Ethan, she said, standing up slowly. You can't just take the kids away like that. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. Do you have any idea what you put me through, Sarah? What you've put our family through? Her face twisted in frustration. You didn't even tell me where you were going. I've been sick with worry. I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. I told you before we left, Sarah. You had a choice to make. Months of choices, actually. But you didn't, so I made one for the kids and me. We needed time away. Time to think. Time to heal. She glanced at the kids, who were now standing a little to the side, watching us closely. Can we talk inside? She asked, her tone quieter. I nodded and motioned for the kids to go back to their rooms. Go unpack and settle in, okay? Your mom and I need to talk. Once we were in the living room, Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. I stayed standing, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Ethan, I'm sorry. She started, her voice breaking. I know I've hurt you. I know I've been selfish. But I never meant to destroy our family. Please, let's work this out. Come home. Bring us back together. I sighed, shaking my head slightly. Sarah, I've given you so many chances. I've been patient, understanding, too much, honestly. And yet you kept lying, sneaking around, putting him ahead of your family. Do you really think a simple sorry is enough to fix that? She wiped her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I'll end it with Jake. I'll quit my job. Whatever you need, Ethan. Just don't take my children away from me. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment I wanted to believe her. But then I thought about everything, the years of betrayal, the lies, the pain she'd caused. Sarah, I said, my voice steady, it's not about what I need anymore. It's about what's best for the kids. You need to prove to them that you're ready to be a real mother again. To be here, fully present, without Jake in the picture. Actions speak louder than words. She nodded, looking down at her hands. I'll do it, Ethan. Whatever it takes. I stood there for a moment, studying her. For the first time in months, I saw something in her eyes that looked like genuine remorse. But I couldn't let myself trust it, not yet. We'll see, Sarah, I said finally. But understand this, if I see even the slightest hint that you're not serious about fixing things, I'll file for divorce and fight for sole custody. The kids deserve stability, and I won't let them be hurt again. She looked up at me, her face pale. I understand, she whispered. Good, I said, pushing off the wall. Let's focus on the kids for now. They've been through enough, and they need both of us to do better. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving her to sit in silence. I didn't know if Sarah would truly follow through on her promises, but one thing was certain, this was her last chance to make things right. I leaned back in my chair, watching Sarah carefully. Her words carried weight, but I needed more than just words. Promises could be broken, and after everything, trust didn't come easily. So you're done with Jake, and you've left the job, I said, my voice steady but skeptical. Why now, Sarah? Why after all these months? She looked down at the glass of wine in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. Because I realized I was losing everything that mattered. I've already lost you, Ethan, and I can't bear the thought of losing the kids too. I was wrong, about everything. About Jake, about us. I thought I wanted something else, but I see now that I had everything I needed right here. I just didn't appreciate it until it was too late. Her voice cracked, and she wiped a tear away, but I stayed silent, letting her continue. I've spent the last few weeks thinking about what I've done, how much pain I've caused you and the kids. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. Sarah, I loved you. I gave you everything I had, my trust, my loyalty, my heart. And you threw it all away for what? A fling with Jake? How am I supposed to believe that this time you're serious? That you won't just fall back into the same patterns? She shook her head vehemently. It wasn't just a fling, Ethan. I thought it was something real, but it wasn't. It was a mistake, a terrible, selfish mistake. I see that now. I've cut all ties with him. I haven't spoken to him since the summer. I quit my job to make sure there's no chance of us crossing paths again. I'm trying, Ethan. I'm really trying. The mention of her quitting her job struck a chord. That was a concrete step, something more than just words. But it wasn't enough to erase the months, years, of betrayal. I hear you, I said finally. And I can see that you're making changes. But you need to understand something, Sarah. This isn't just about you and me. It's about the kids. They've been through hell because of this. They might not know all the details, but they know enough to feel the tension, the instability. If we're going to try to fix this, it's going to take time, and it's going to take more than just quitting your job or saying you're done with Jake. She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. I know. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. Just tell me what you need from me, Ethan. I sat back, exhaling deeply. I'll think about it. But for now, we're still moving forward with the divorce. I can't promise anything beyond that. I need time to figure out if I can ever trust you again. And more importantly, I need to make sure the kids are okay. Her face fell, but she nodded. I understand. She whispered. I'll stay involved with the kids. I continued. I'm not going to abandon them, no matter what happens between us. But you need to prove to me, and to them, that you're committed to being a better mother and a better person. Actions, Sarah. Not words. She wiped her eyes and stood up, walking toward the kitchen sink to rinse out her glass. Thank you for coming over, Ethan, she said quietly. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'll do everything I can to earn one. I stood, grabbing my jacket from the back of the chair. We'll see, Sarah. For now, just focus on the kids. They need stability more than anything. As I walked to the door, Jackson peeked around the corner, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. Dad, are you staying? I crouched down and hugged him tightly. Not tonight, buddy. But I'll see you soon, okay? Be good for your mom. He nodded, though his smile faded slightly as he watched me leave. As I drove back to the hotel, my mind raced with conflicting emotions. Sarah's words had sounded sincere, but trust was a fragile thing, and she'd shattered it more than once. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her, and us, a chance to rebuild. But another part of me couldn't shake the memories of her betrayal. For now, I'd let her actions speak louder than her words. Only time would tell if she could truly change. Sarah promised. Ethan, I'll be yours forever. Only yours. Her words hung in the air like smoke, choking me with emotions I wasn't ready to face. I sat there, weighed down by a storm of thoughts. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her, or at the kitchen where she stood. Instead, I closed my eyes, hoping to shut out everything around me. My mind drifted to my kids, their bright faces, their unfiltered laughter, the memories of the woman who had once vowed to be my everything. Could I really let that go? Where had it all gone so wrong? And if I did walk away, what kind of future would I have without them? The ache in my chest made me long to erase all the pain we'd been through. But could I fix it? Stay or leave? The question gnawed at me. Deep down, though, I already knew the truth. Sarah was lying. Every word was just noise. For over a decade, she had chosen Jake. Sure, they might have hit the brakes recently, but I knew it wouldn't last. Once I moved back in, they'd pick up right where they left off. No matter what Sarah and he said, I knew the final step of my plan was necessary. It wouldn't happen overnight, but it would be worth it. 10 years of lies, what was that worth? So yeah, I moved back home. The kids were over the moon, and Sarah? She played her part, acting thrilled and diving headfirst into her perfect wife and mom routine. She threw herself into chores and smiles, trying to prove she was someone she hadn't been in years. Some might call me a fool for returning to a woman who'd been with Jake since before she even met me. But let's be clear, patience wins battles. Planning wins wars. I knew Sarah wouldn't change. Sure, she'd pulled away from Jake in the past, like when the kids were born, but she always found her way back to him. This time wouldn't be any different. I could see it all playing out in my mind. Sarah would wait until she thought I'd let my guard down, then sneak back into her old routine with Jake. So I bided my time, gathering the proof I needed to end this charade for good. I met with my lawyer and the investigator, paying for each step of the process. All I had to do was let things unfold naturally. And predictably, Sarah and Jake didn't disappoint. Within a few months, they were back to their usual antics. Sarah took a brief hiatus, sure, she even picked up a part-time job to sell the illusion of change. But that job was just a cover to meet up with Jake. My investigators' reports confirmed it. They were back at his hideaway, spending 2 afternoons a week together like clockwork. It almost made me laugh, watching Sarah come home those evenings, bubbling over with fake cheer. It was guilt, plain and simple, her way of overcompensating after an afternoon with Jake. I played along, waiting for the right time to escalate my plan. Meanwhile, I made sure to stay close. Most nights, I slept with Sarah, except on the days I knew she'd been with him. On those particular days, I made a point to be the picture-perfect husband, attentive, thoughtful, and full of charm. I'd take Sarah out to dinner, plan family outings, surprise her with flowers or small gifts, and constantly praise her for being a great mom. My goal was simple: lull her into a false sense of security. I wanted her to believe she had won, that everything was as perfect as she pretended it to be. But beneath the surface, I had my reasons. I wanted Sarah to fully grasp what she had lost, to understand the chaos she and Jake had brought into our lives. I wanted her to remember moments like that summer when I took the kids to Canada, a small preview of the life she'd chosen for herself. A life without me. A life where she could have Jake all she wanted, and I wouldn't care anymore. Patience. That was my mantra. I reminded myself to wait until the timing was right. Then I'd act. June rolled around, the end of the school year. By then, all the groundwork had been laid. My lawyer and the investigator had wrapped up their work, and the documents were ready to go. I set a date for the server to deliver them, right at our house. Sarah had no idea what was coming. I told her and the kids we'd be leaving for a trip the day after school ended. The trailer was packed with food and everything else we'd need. The kids were excited, busy getting their stuff together for what they thought was a summer adventure. D-Day arrived. Sarah left for a shopping trip around 8:30 in the morning, planning to be out for a few hours. It was perfect. By 9, the kids and I had loaded up the truck and hit the road. I didn't bother telling Sarah where we were going. As far as she was concerned, we were heading to parts unknown, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Not long after, a faint buzzing caught my attention. It was coming from the burner phone I kept hidden in my desk, the one Sarah used to text me on. The ringer was off, but the vibration was loud enough to hear in the quiet. I checked the message. "I need to see you right away. Meet me at the apartment in an hour." It wasn't like Sarah to deviate from our plan. We'd agreed not to meet for a while since her husband was taking some time off for a camping trip with the kids. That kind of thing didn't matter to me. I didn't see them as my kids anyway. Sure, I'd gotten her pregnant, that's what she wanted, but it never felt real to me. Sarah, though? She was incredible in bed. That was all I cared about. I showed up at the apartment, grabbed a beer, and waited. Sarah burst in a few minutes later, looking frazzled, clutching a large brown envelope. She tossed it onto the table, her expression panicked. "Jake, he did it," she blurted. "He left with the kids this morning. And I got served this." She pointed at the envelope with a shaky hand before sinking into a chair and burying her face in her hands. Moments later, she stood up, poured herself a glass of wine, and took a long, desperate sip. When she finally looked at me, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before: fear. Usually, it was just lust. I opened the envelope and dumped its contents onto the table. Divorce papers. A quick scan revealed photos attached with a note stating they were just a preview of what could be used in the case. Sarah handed me another envelope with her name scrawled on it. "Read this," she whispered. I skimmed the letter, my stomach sinking. "Damn," I muttered under my breath. I flipped back to the divorce papers, found the signature page, and slid it towards Sarah. "Sign it," I said firmly, holding out a pen. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. "Sarah, you need to sign these now. If Ethan drags this out and Emily finds out, we're both screwed. And don't forget, those kids? They're yours too." Her gaze locked on mine as I downed the rest of my beer. "Yes," I said quietly, "they are." The weight of the situation hit me like a freight train. There was only one way out of this mess, and it was staring us in the face. "Sign the papers, Sarah," I repeated. "If Emily catches wind of this, she'll destroy everything. Her family's connections will wipe out our business, and I'll lose everything I've built. I like my big house. I like the life I have. So sign it. Ethan has won. It's time to move on." My interest in Sarah had all but vanished. Sure, having a married woman at my beck and call had been thrilling for a while, and getting her pregnant was an ego boost in its own weird way. But now, she was becoming more trouble than she was worth. I couldn't let this spiral any further. Sarah looked worn down, but she finally picked up the pen. With a heavy sigh, she scribbled her name in all 4 places, then slumped back into her chair like the weight of the world had just dropped on her shoulders. Meanwhile, I was already moving forward. Back on the road, as the saying goes. Yeah, I know, it's a bit cliché. But here we were, cruising westward, leaving Albany and everything tied to it behind. The truck was unusually quiet that first day as the kids processed the sudden change. We drove hard, aiming to put a good distance between us and the life we just left behind before stopping for the night. I'd booked a spot at an RV park, and we pulled in just before supper. Everyone was worn out, so I got the camper hooked up, settled us in, and whipped up a quick dinner. That night, we sat around a campfire, roasting marshmallows and chatting. The kids peppered me with questions about where we were headed and what adventures lay ahead. They deserved some answers, so I laid out a few details. "You're probably curious about what's next," I began, watching their eager faces illuminated by the flickering flames. "There'll be some adventures, hiking, bugs, maybe even a few scrapes along the way." I glanced at Sophia and Olivia, who giggled, remembering our time in Ontario last summer. Mia, being the oldest, already knew bits and pieces of the plan. But now it was time to share more. "Hey, do you guys like horses?" I asked with a grin. Their eyes lit up as they erupted in excitement. "Well," I paused for effect. "How about riding horses on a ranch in West Texas?" The kids went wild, galloping around the campfire, pretending to be horses. Their joy was contagious, but in the back of my mind, doubts lingered. Was this the right move? It was a big leap for all of us. I couldn't help but replay the moment I bought the ranch near San Angelo. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, an auction where I snagged it for just over $2 million. The property was impressive, a sprawling 1,500 acres with a well-kept 5-bedroom log home that had plenty of room for updates. There were several outbuildings, one of which I planned to convert into a horse barn. A local farmer had already approached me about grazing his cattle on the land, which would help cover some of the expenses. My biggest worry, though, was making sure the kids had access to good schools. Thankfully, San Angelo, just a few miles away, had everything we need. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging thought, West Texas? What the hell was I thinking? 3 months later, in late July, we finally rolled into San Angelo. Our journey from Albany had been slow and winding, intentionally so. I'd wanted to avoid any chance of running into Sarah, though it turned out I needn't have worried. My lawyer kept me updated along the way. Sarah had signed the divorce papers without a fight. She'd even had her lawyer review the deal I'd put together, which gave her the house, all the furniture, our joint bank accounts, both cars, and enough cash to keep her afloat for a year. In the end, it was a clean break, at least on paper. The house Sarah got in the divorce was worth about $600,000, with a $150,000 mortgage still on it. That left her with close to $450,000 if she decided to sell. The car I left her, a VW Passat, was in great shape and would last her for years. I kept the Subaru and the trailer, packing only the essentials, knowing we'd start fresh in Texas with new things. The settlement also included certified DNA tests, which proved I wasn't the biological father of the kids. I even went as far as getting Jake to submit his DNA for comparison. My main goal was to secure sole custody of the kids, cutting Sarah out of the equation entirely. No visitation rights, nothing. If she tried to contest, my lawyer was ready to expose every sordid detail to Jake's wife and the public, which would have destroyed him. Jake gave in, and Sarah signed everything, even a clause stating she never asked me for financial support. She also agreed to revert to her maiden name. With all the paperwork finalized, that chapter of my life was officially closed. So here I am, not even 40 yet, raising 4 kids between the ages of 7 and 12, sitting on a ranch in West Texas, and a cool $7 million in the bank. What's next? Whatever I want. When we moved into the ranch, we got everything set up before the school year started. The kids were amazing. They pitched in with everything, helping turn the place into our home. The real highlight, though, was the day we went to a local horse ranch for riding lessons. The kids were bouncing with excitement, practically vibrating in their seats. The instructor, Rachel, was the epitome of a country girl, checked shirt, tight jeans, cowboy boots, and a white hat to top it off. She was also a veterinarian and a barrel racer. I had no clue what barrel racing was, but I was more than curious to learn. The first lesson was a mixed bag, pure fun for the kids and pure awkwardness for me. Rachel picked calm, well-trained horses for the kids, making sure they felt at ease before tackling anything advanced. Then she turned to me. "All right, Ethan, let's meet your horse," she said with a knowing smile. "Me? Oh no, I'm just thinking of getting a quad for riding around instead," I protested, waving off the idea. She shot me a firm look. "You can get your quad, sure, but your kids are learning to ride, and you're riding with them. Stop making excuses and take the reins. This here's Pete. He's about 10 years old and won't give you any trouble if you treat him right." Then she leaned in and added softly, "Besides, the kids are watching. You'd better get on the horse." She had a point. Reluctantly, I climbed up onto Pete's back, feeling completely out of place in my hiking boots, jeans, and windbreaker. The kids laughed, and I knew I wasn't living this one down anytime soon. After the lesson, Rachel suggested we get proper riding gear for the kids and offered to help us shop. When she casually asked if my wife would be riding too, I told her there wasn't a wife anymore. She nodded thoughtfully, filing that little tidbit away. The days started to fall into a rhythm. Mornings were a rush to get the kids to school, about 20 minutes away. I wasn't about to let them be late. Their school was excellent, and I'd made sure to meet their teachers and the principal, so they knew they could always reach me if there was ever an issue. At home, I converted an old weapons room into a study area and library for the kids. It turned out fantastic. New bookshelves, desks, computers, tablets, and a business-grade printer. It feels like a top-tier study hall. The kids don't put up a fight about homework, and I'm always available to help. We even set up a 65-inch TV to stream educational content, and I upgraded our internet to super-fast fiber optic to keep everything running smoothly. Evenings are a whirlwind of activities, but horseback riding quickly became the family favorite. While the kids were at school, I'd been sneaking in my own riding lessons. Spending an hour or two at the stables each day was starting to pay off. I was getting the hang of it. Even Pete, my horse, seemed to notice. One afternoon, as I rode back toward the barn, Rachel was there, finishing up some vaccinations. "Look at you," she said, grinning. "Getting all confident on horseback." "Thanks," I replied with a chuckle. "But Pete here's the one doing most of the work." Rachel tilted her head, her eyes narrowing playfully. "So, have you decided when you're getting your own horses?" "Almost ready," I said. Just need to wrap up the barn renovations. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks. The kids are chomping at the bit, but I want everything to be perfect before they bring the horses home. Smart move. She nodded. When the time comes, would you like my help finding the right ones for the kids? And I assume you're getting one for yourself too, right? I couldn't help but smile. I'd love your help. The kids would be over the moon. Maybe we could talk about it over dinner, or a drink. She hesitated for a moment before smiling back. I'd like that. How about this weekend? Perfect. It wasn't exactly a date, but it was the first time I'd been out with a woman since Sarah. The kids, of course, caught wind of it and wouldn't stop teasing me. The night of, I made sure my truck was spotless and picked up Rachel right on time. She wanted something other than the usual Texas barbecue, so I took her to an Italian restaurant known for its incredible food and wine. When I rang her doorbell, I wasn't prepared for how stunning she'd look, her hair down, a simple yet elegant dress. Wow, I said, genuinely taken aback. You look lovely. Thank you, she said, smiling as I opened the truck door for her. Mom always taught me to have good manners. At first, things were a little awkward, but once we ordered drinks, the conversation started flowing. We talked about everything: horses, life, even a few funny stories from her barrel racing days. The food was amazing, and so was her company. I stuck to one drink since I was driving, but Rachel had a couple, staying perfectly composed. At the end of the night, as I walked her to her door, she kissed me on the cheek. Thanks for a great evening, she said softly. When I got home, I paid the neighbor who had watched the kids and braced myself for their barrage of questions. They didn't disappoint, firing off a million questions about my night with Rachel, giggling the entire time. The barn was set to be finished the following week, and by the weekend, we were ready to look for horses. Early Saturday morning, I loaded up the kids, and we picked up Rachel around 7:30 a.m. I'd recently bought a new Suburban, which fit all of us comfortably. While the kids begged her to sit in the back with them, I insisted she take the front passenger seat. Rachel had arranged for us to visit a ranch about 30 minutes south of town. It was known for selling young horses each year as part of their breeding program. The kids couldn't stop chattering during the drive, each one listing what they wanted in their horse. Rachel was there to keep us grounded. No wild stallions or anything too tall, she warned. We need horses that match their skill levels. The day flew by as we looked at, talked about, and rode horses. By the end, we had picked 5 that fit perfectly with what we needed. To celebrate, we invited Rachel to our ranch for a barbecue and a tour of the new horse barn. The kids couldn't wait to show her around, leading her through the freshly upgraded barn. She was impressed, and honestly, so was I. The new walls and roof looked solid. Solar panels provided power, with a backup generator just in case. There was a tack room, a wash stall, and plenty of hay storage. Each stall had its own water faucet, and the LED lighting was on timers. This is impressive, Rachel said, running her hand along one of the new stalls. You've thought of everything. Her approval felt good. This place was shaping up to be more than just a ranch, it was starting to feel like home. After the barn tour, the kids eagerly led me to the house. Calling it a cabin would have been a stretch, it was more of a rustic mansion. The place boasted 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a massive library, and 4 fireplaces. Ethan, ever modest, waved it off, saying, "It needs a bit of work." The barbecue was fantastic, with the kids keeping me entertained with their endless jokes and games. They had a contagious energy that filled the evening with laughter. Once they went to bed, the night took a more intimate turn. Taking Ethan's hand, I said softly, "Why don't you show me the master bedroom?" We brought along glasses of wine, and as soon as the door clicked shut and the lights dimmed, I kicked off my boots and jeans. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching me with a look that sent shivers down my spine, before slowly unbuttoning his shirt. What happened next? Let's just say it was beyond anything I'd ever experienced, passionate, intense, and electric. For Ethan, it was a night to remember too. Rachel's incredible, he admitted the next day, grinning. Hands down the best I've ever had. With Sarah, it was all about revenge after finding out about Jake, no passion, just hollow satisfaction. But this was different. He couldn't stop smiling as he talked about Rachel's intelligence, beauty, and resourcefulness. He wasn't sure yet if this was something deeper or just fulfilling long-ignored needs, but he knew one thing: it wouldn't take much for him to fall for her. The night didn't end with just one round of passion. Afterward, they showered, made a late-night snack, shared a beer, and found their way back to bed for round 2. The next morning brought a new dynamic. The kids were surprised to see Rachel in the kitchen, standing beside Ethan as he cooked breakfast. Mia gave her dad a knowing look that said, "What's going on, Dad?" But the younger ones, blissfully unaware, immediately launched into excited chatter about horses and plans for the ranch. Meanwhile, the house renovations were coming along steadily. Ethan was transforming the place into a modern, sustainable haven. He updated the kitchen and bathrooms, installed solar panels, a wind generator, and a geothermal system for heating and cooling. The well was deepened and expanded, complete with a water storage tank for fire suppression. He also replaced the septic system and upgraded the backup generator to seamlessly integrate with the new energy systems. It was a massive investment, but Ethan was meticulous with his finances. Thanks to a thriving stock market and tax incentives for green energy, he was staying on top of it all. He'd even set aside funds in fixed interest accounts as a safety net, ensuring that if the markets took a dive, the family would be secure. Worst case, they could sell off part of the land and still be comfortable. And Rachel? She had her own take on things. "Since getting to know Ethan and the kids," she shared, "I've been amazed by how close they are as a family. Ethan is an incredible father, and the kids are remarkable, kind, hardworking, and full of life." Rachel and Ethan had spent hours talking about his past, particularly his divorce from Sarah. He opened up about Sarah's long-term affair with her old boyfriend, which had persisted throughout their marriage and only came to light last summer. He told her how he'd left Sarah, taking the kids in their fifth-wheel trailer, and eventually landing here in West Texas. Rachel admired Ethan's resilience and the love he had for his children. And as she looked around at the life he was building, she couldn't help but feel like she was becoming part of something truly special. "It's quite a journey we've been on." Ethan shared something deeply personal. Sarah's boyfriend is the biological father of the kids. Yet, Ethan's love for them hasn't wavered. He's determined to keep them and give them the best life possible. Sarah must have been out of her mind to cheat on him. "I can't think of a better man to be married to, which is why I'm patiently waiting for him to ask. My parents have started dropping hints about my future. They've met Ethan and the kids, and they absolutely adore them. My mom treats the kids like royalty when we visit, and my dad has shared countless beers with Ethan, grilling him with question after question. My mom has done everything but outright ask when we're getting married. Tonight's the night Ethan is planning to change both our lives forever." The evening was warm, and Ethan wanted everything to be perfect. He invited my parents over for a barbecue to celebrate the new pool. Earlier, he shared his plan with the kids, reminding them to keep their expectations in check. "As much as I love Ethan and his family, marrying into a household of 5 is a huge commitment. Even though I've spent plenty of time with them, living together full-time would be a major adjustment." Ethan admitted to being nervous. His past with Sarah still weighs on him, though he's come so far. He's a man who's learned from his experiences and is ready to open his heart again. The kids helped set up the patio, brought out a cooler, and played a special CD. Ethan hid the ring box in a flower pot. Then, taking my hand, he led me to a chair set up in the middle of a semicircle. Everyone gathered behind me. "You're probably wondering what I'm up to," he began with a nervous smile. I nodded, already suspecting where this was heading. "Since I met you, I've fallen more in love with you every day," he continued, his voice steady but full of emotion. Then, he reached into the flower pot, pulled out the ring box, and knelt in front of me. "Rachel, will you marry me?" I couldn't help but laugh softly. "I was wondering when you'd ask, Ethan Harris," I replied. "Yes, I'd love to marry you." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and as we kissed, everyone cheered. Just as they were about to rush forward to celebrate, I held up my hand. "Wait," I said with a grin. "I have something for you." From my pocket, I pulled out a small white plastic object and handed it to Ethan. His face lit up as he realized what it was. "It's a good thing you proposed," I said with a smile. "Because you're going to be a father again." Holy crap. We got married soon after, blending our lives into a family of 6.5. Our son, Liam, was born weighing 7 pounds, 11 ounces, and both he and I are doing great. Ethan's been on cloud nine ever since. The ranch is thriving. We've started our own small cattle herd and hired cowboys to manage the daily tasks. My dad has been an incredible help with setting up the business. He's practically part of the ranch staff now, always lending a hand. The kids are riding more often, and Ethan's getting increasingly comfortable on horseback. He also bought a side-by-side ATV for work around the ranch, complete with a cargo box and trailer. Ethan's entrepreneurial spirit hasn't stopped there. He's launched a business refurbishing and reselling pickup trucks and farm equipment. It's a booming industry with new gear being so expensive, and he's already hired 3 mechanics from a local trade school. Not one to stop at just one venture, Ethan also started a small construction company. With 2 carpenters from the community college on board, they're tackling smaller projects to build a strong reputation. Our life together is busy, rewarding, and filled with love. From the ranch to the businesses, to raising our blended family, we've built something truly special. And the best part? We're just getting started. My father-in-law runs the business with a firm and steady hand. If demand increases, I'm ready to expand by adding another crew. We're all busy, growing, and becoming part of the community.
Rachel's side of story. One quiet afternoon the doorbell rang. Olivia was by my side as I checked the video monitor. A woman stood on the porch, around 40, attractive and alone. Olivia tugged at my arm, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh no, Mom, that's the woman who used to be my mother. I don't want to see her." Before I could respond, she turned and disappeared down the hall toward her room. It was Sarah. I took a moment to steady myself before opening the door. She gave me a quick once-over before speaking. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Yes, I'm looking for Ethan Harris. I heard he might live here." "He does," I replied. "I'm his wife, Rachel Harris. What do you want with my husband?" Her confidence wavered. "I was hoping to talk to him. And maybe see my children." "You're Sarah, aren't you?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Ethan's in town and the kids are at school. Leave your phone number, and he might call you when he's back." "Maybe I can wait for him," she offered, her voice tinged with desperation. "That's probably not a good idea," I replied firmly. "Ethan has told me about you, and I'm confident the kids don't want to see you. You damaged that relationship a long time ago. And as for Ethan, I doubt he'll want to talk to you either. He's worked hard to move on and be a great father. It's best if you go home." As I spoke, I kept a close eye on her face and hands. This is Texas after all, and most folks keep a weapon nearby just in case. I wasn't sure if Sarah was here to apologize or if she had more sinister intentions. If she made any sudden moves, I was prepared to shut and lock the door, then grab my own weapon if necessary. Our front door is thick and reinforced with a metal plate, strong enough to stop a bullet or even a rifle blast. The original owner of the house installed it for his family's protection. We also have an alarm system with a panic button that calls the sheriff's office directly. Growing up in Texas, I learned to shoot as a kid. My father, a National Guard veteran with a tour in Iraq, made sure my brothers and I knew how to handle firearms safely and accurately. Protecting my family is my top priority, and while I wasn't overly worried about Sarah, I wasn't taking any chances. She stood there for a moment, then broke down in tears. "I really need to talk to him," she sobbed. "I want to apologize for all the pain I caused him and the kids." "What makes you think he wants to see you at all?" I asked, keeping my tone measured. "Maybe he doesn't," she admitted. "But could you at least tell him I'd like to talk? Just for a few minutes." She handed me a slip of paper with her phone number and the name of the motel where she was staying. "Please," she said. "I just want to talk to him." When Ethan came home with the kids later, I told him about Sarah's visit. He was stunned. "I can't believe she found us," he said, shaking his head. "I don't want her here, and I don't want anything to do with her. If she doesn't understand that by now, she's clearly delusional." After some thought, Ethan decided to call Sarah's mother. It had been years since he'd spoken to anyone in her family, not since he took the kids and left for Canada. He figured they must have been curious about what happened and where their grandchildren had gone. The call went about as expected. Lots of shouting, crying, and pleading. At one point, Sarah's mother said something that visibly angered Ethan. She begged to see her grandchildren, claiming she didn't even know Sarah had left the city to find us. It became clear that Sarah hadn't been honest with her family about the situation. They didn't know the full extent of her decade-long affair with Jake, or how deeply it had fractured her relationship with Ethan and the kids. Sarah hadn't told her family much of the truth. I asked her what her plan was, but she didn't have an answer. So, I mentioned that I was considering a restraining order to keep her away. I told her about my new life, my new wife, new son, and the fresh start I had made for my family, and asked her to make it clear to Sarah that she needed to leave us alone. By the end of the call, I was resolute. I would not allow Sarah any contact with the kids. When they were older, they could decide for themselves, but until then, I was firm in my decision. Rachel agreed with me. The next morning, I called my lawyer in Albany and asked him to contact Jake's lawyer, suggesting it might be in Jake's best interest to convince Sarah to return to Albany and leave us in peace. I made it clear that if Jake failed to do so, there could be consequences. What those consequences were, well, that was something for them to figure out. Rachel and I then put a plan in place to ensure Sarah couldn't ambush the kids. I was worried that she might be having a mental health crisis, thinking she could somehow fix everything by showing up in Texas. Rachel's father even brought over some of his weapons for protection. I assured him that we were prepared, so after a visit and a heartfelt hug for Liam, he took most of them back home. My lawyer gave Jake's lawyer a deadline. I needed proof that Sarah was back in Albany, but deep down, I knew I would eventually have to face her one last time. The next evening around supper time, the doorbell rang. It was Sarah. Rachel was right behind me, making sure the kids were safely tucked away in the library. The door closed so they wouldn't overhear. I took a deep breath before opening the door. "Hello, Sarah." She looked at me, then at Rachel. "May I come in?" she asked. I raised my hand to stop her. "If you came here hoping we'd return to Albany, you've wasted your time," I said. "We're not coming back. The kids and I have a new life here, and as you can see, Rachel and I are married now. We have a family. I just want to see my children," she said softly, almost pleading. Vengeance means different things to different people, but for me it was taking the kids and leaving Sarah behind as payback for a decade of lies. Moving to Texas was my escape from the humiliation of staying in a marriage built on deception. I couldn't abandon my kids, though. They were my priority, and they saw me as their protector, their father. Every decision I made had to include them. I had thought about this a lot during our trip to Canada, and when we returned I knew what I had to do. Now, Sarah was standing on my porch asking to see the kids, even though she had signed over custody to me in the divorce and agreed to no contact. "Why now? Why now, Sarah?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with frustration. "Why drive all the way from Albany? What makes you think the kids want to see you after everything you did?" Mia and Jackson knew what she had done. Sophia and Olivia knew she had chosen Jake over them. "Are you still with Jake?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Sarah looked down. "Jake and I are done," she said quietly. "And how does that change anything here?" I pressed. She looked up, desperation in her eyes. "Ethan, I just want to see the kids," she pleaded. "I miss them. Please, would you let me see them? I need to think about it and talk to the kids. But it's not happening right now. Go back to your motel and I'll call you," I said, my voice steady but firm. I needed time to figure out what was really going on. Was she having some kind of breakdown, thinking this would fix everything? Or was someone else pushing her to do this? Either way, I wasn't about to let her hurt my family again. Sarah nodded, gave me her phone number and the motel name, then walked to her car, my old Subaru. She looked back at the house before getting in and slowly drove off. Rachel and I turned around and closed the door behind us. Mia was standing there, her eyes wide. "What did she want?" she asked. That night at dinner, I brought up their mother. The kids immediately stopped eating and looked at me tense. I told them she had asked to see them and asked if they wanted to see her. After a long quiet discussion, we took a vote. I wasn't surprised when they all said no. I knew what I had to do next. I called Jake. He was stunned to hear from me, considering everything that had happened. I had to repeat myself a couple of times before he finally understood. "Jake, your girlfriend showed up on my porch, violating our agreement. Get her out of Texas now." "What makes you think I can tell her what to do?" he asked. "Wake up, Jake. If you don't get her out of here, I'll consider this a violation of our agreement. And your wife, Margaret, remember her? She'll get a package of information by courier. You like your comfortable life in Albany." There was silence on the line. "Well, do you?" I pressed. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan," he replied. "Grow up, Jake. I'll ruin your life, your business, everything you've got. You'll regret ever getting involved with her. You have 24 hours to get her out of Texas." More silence. "Do you understand?" Quietly, he replied. "I understand." I gave him the details of Sarah's motel. Later that night, Rachel's parents came over. We decided it might be best if Rachel and the kids stayed with them until this was resolved. We didn't tell the kids much, Just that Grandma and Grandpa invited them over. After they left, I stayed behind waiting to see what would happen. Surprisingly, not much did. Sarah didn't show up again. When I visited the motel, the manager mentioned there had been some fuss involving a woman from out east, a lawyer, and another man, but they all left shortly after. My lawyer called around midnight to tell me Jake's lawyer had informed him Sarah was on her way back to Albany. Jake guaranteed she wouldn't bother us again. Later, I found out Jake had hired a local lawyer and investigator to find Sarah, then flown to Texas himself to convince her to return to Albany. That was the last time I saw her. The next morning, Rachel, the kids, and I returned home, and life started to settle back into its usual rhythm. Hold on to that horse, I shouted at Mia, who was practicing barrel racing in the ring with her pony. Hard right. Now hard left, ride fast to the finish line. Not bad for a beginner. She and the horse were learning together. It would take time before she was ready for a major competition, but she was making great progress. The kids were growing and getting busier with each passing year. Ethan even got Liam a pony, and he'd take him on rides with him. The horse was gentle, understanding it had a toddler rider. Will was still very young, but I could tell he was going to love riding. As for me, I wasn't riding at the moment. I was pregnant again. I still did some vet work, but that was winding down as my due date approached. Between the kids, the ranch, and our businesses, Ethan was putting in long days. At night when we went to bed, he'd massage my feet and back and we'd make love. Sleeping in the buff seemed to encourage that sort of thing. Sorry, I need to pee again. I laughed, rubbing my belly. These twins are always pressing on my bladder.